Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 5 and probably the final part of our memory game series. So far, we have got a fully working game. Cards are randomly generated, player selections are tracked and validated. We have added reset, play again, attempt tracking, and a win message. In this last part, we are going to bring it all together visually by adding some styling to the cards to make the experience more interactive and polished. So, without any further delays, let's jump into it. The first thing I want to do is style the outer card, the container that holds all the individual cards. If you remember from earlier parts, we had style as transparent, but now I'm going to switch to standard. Why? Because standard adds a light background which gives the card area a more structured look. So now my card layout that wraps the grid looks like this. Now that we have styled the outer card layout, let's move on to the individual cards inside the grid. The goal here is to give some visual feedback when a player clicks a card. We want selected cards to stand out just a bit. Not too loud, just enough to show that they are active. So I'm heading over to the card layout where I render each number in the grid and I'm adding a style parameter to that. If contains, I'm using contains to check whether the current index, that's FP bank index, is in local selected index. You might be wondering, out of all the local variables, why are we using local selected index to control the styling here? So let me explain that. Earlier in part 4, we introduced this local variable called local selected index to store the indexes of the cards the player clicks. And whenever a user clicks a card, we append its index into this variable, which means every time the player interacts with a card, its position in the grid gets stored in the local selected index. And that's super helpful here because when we want to style only the clicked cards, we need a way to know which ones they are, right? So instead of checking the card number or doing any complex comparison, we can just say, hey, is this card's index inside local selected index? If yes, style it as selected. If no, leave it plain. So if the current card has been clicked, we return info, which gives it a soft blue highlight. Otherwise, we use none, which keeps it plain and unstyled. It errors out as we have variables of two different types. So here I wrap local selected index with two integer just to make sure we are comparing integers. Alright, let's test the styling logic now. First, just take a look at the board before clicking anything. Right now, none of the cards have any background styling, and that's exactly what we expect. Because at the start, local selected index is null, which means the list is empty. And since our style condition checks if local selected index contains the current selected index. So none of the indexes are present and it always returns false and the style is none. So far so good. Now let's click a card and there we go. As soon as I click, that card now has a soft blue background. That's because its index was just added to local selected index. So when that if condition runs again, it returns true for that specific card and the style switches to info. Now that we have added background styling using style parameter for selected cards, let's go one step further and give players feedback using border color. So now I'm heading over to the same card layout where we are entering each number and I'm adding a new parameter. That's border color. This is especially useful when validating whether a card click was correct or wrong. If local validate is equal to true, that means the player clicked the correct card in sequence. So in that case, we want to highlight that card with a green border, and that's what positive does. Else, if the card was selected but the move wasn't valid, we use this condition, contains local selected index, FP index. This is going to check whether the current index, that's FP bank index, is in local selected index. If yes, and since we are in the else branch of the first condition, it means the click wasn't valid. We return negative. This gives the card a red border to indicate it was an incorrect move. And if the card wasn't selected at all, we fall back to standard. So untouched cards just keep their normal default border. Alright, The logic which we have just implemented is supposed to show green border for correct moves, red border for wrong moves, and default border for untouched cards. Wait a second, all the cards are now showing green borders, even the ones I didn't click. That's not what we want. Let's debug this to know why this is happening. I think the problem is with local validate, and by default, the value of local validate is set to true. And that's why all cards are now glowing green. I think to fix it, we need to combine local validate with a check to see if this specific card is part of the current selection. So local validate is equal to true. This means the player's last selection was correct. They clicked the correct number in sequence. And in the second condition, with the help of contains, we are checking if this card is one of the selected ones. So we should update the logic like this. So what we actually need is to make sure that two things are true at the same time. And that's why I have wrapped these two conditions with AND function. So this way we are saying only give the green border if this card was selected and the move was validated as correct. So we usually see this error because of type mismatch between local selected index and FVBang index, as one side is text and the other is number. So to fix this, we need to add a null check. If abang is null or empty local selected index, this is going to check if the player hasn't clicked anything yet. If the list is empty, we don't want any border, so we just return standard. Do not go any further, no need to validate or check anything. But if something has been selected, then we move on and run the actual validation logic. So I have just added a simple check at the top of the border color condition. It is going to avoid errors when the user first lands on the screen and nothing has been clicked yet. It's a really small change, but it makes a huge difference in how safe the UI feels. Cool, now let's test this. So first, before I click anything, notice how all cards just look normal. Default border, nothing highlighted. That's expected because we haven't selected anything yet. So that first if condition is doing its job. If nothing has been selected, just return standard and don't go deeper. Now I'll click a card and there we go. This time it still has the blue background, but now we get a red border. That's a negative value kicking in. That tells the player clearly, hey, this wasn't the right move. And the rest of the cards are still in the default border. That confirms our contains logic is only affecting what has been clicked. Now I'll reset the board and click a correct card. And you can see the card flips to show the number. It gets a soft blue background. And since it was the right number in the sequence, it gets a green border. That means both conditions were met, local validate is equal to true, and the card was in local selected index. So the border color logic is working exactly the way we want. Now I will go ahead and click what I think is the next number in the sequence. Yes, again correct. Card flips, same blue background, another green border. So now both of the selected cards are marked correctly. So far so good, our validation logic is giving us a green signal. Let's try clicking a third card now. This time it's not the correct number. The moment I click it, all three cards including the first two now show a red border. That's because we are storing the selection in local selected index, and now that the validation has failed, our condition applies negative to all cards in that list. And that's exactly what we wanted. Each correct click gives green feedback, one mistake turns all involved cards red, and unselected cards stay neutral. At this point, I have two options. I can reset and try this round again, or I can play again to start fresh with a new shuffled board. I'll hit reset for now, and that clears the board. All the cards are flipped back down, red borders are gone, the local attempt count is now increased by 1. Alright, now I'm gonna go ahead and try clicking the cards in the correct sequence from 1 to 9. This is number 1. Perfect, it's the first card in the sequence. You can see it flips, gets a soft blue background, and we have a green border. That means it was a correct move. That's number 2, again correct. The green border shows up again, telling us that we are still on the right path. There's number 3. I'll keep going in the same way, just taking it slow and making sure each number is clicked in order. That's 4, 5, 6, everything is holding up. The feedback stays responsive, green border for each correct card. And I'm almost there, cards 7 and 8 both correct, and finally number 9. All cards flipped in the right sequence, and I now see a nice U1 message right at the top. That's because a tracking variable local number has reached 9, meaning we completed all moves in the right sequence. And notice that reset button is disabled. That's because once the player has won, we don't let them reset anymore, which makes sense. If I now want to replay the game, I just click play again, and that resets everything. It's fresh and ready. And that's it for this part. In this video, we focused completely on styling, making the memory game feel more polished and visually engaging. We covered the outer part to give it a cleaner, solid background, the inner cards with dynamic styling, blue for selected, green for correct, red for incorrect. Everything now not only works but looks and feels like a real game. If you have followed along from the beginning, you have built a full memory game in Appian from scratch, which is super cool. If you have any questions about anything we covered, feel free to reach out in the comments. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, bye-bye.